Hey everyone, I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the next terrifying upload. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more of the content you love. My girlfriend and I had been driving for hours, trying to make it to her parents' place for Thanksgiving. We were tired, cranky, and desperately needed a break from the endless highway. It was getting dark when we saw the sign for the lone motel. The name should have been a warning, but we were too exhausted to care. We pulled off the exit, following a winding road through thick woods until we reached a small clearing. The motel looked old and run down, with flickering neon lights and peeling paint, but it was the only place for miles, so we didn't have much choice. We parked our car in the nearly empty lot and headed to the office. The guy at the front desk gave me the creeps right away. He was too friendly, asking way too many questions about our trip and where we were headed. I just wanted to get our room key and crash, but he kept talking. Something about his smile seemed off, like he was hiding something behind it. Finally, we got our key and made our way to our room. It was basic, with outdated furniture and a musty smell, but it had a bed, and that's all we cared about. We fell asleep almost immediately. I'm not sure how long we'd been out when I woke up to a weird noise. At first, I thought it was just the old building settling. But then I heard it again, footsteps right outside our door. I tried to convince myself it was just another guest, but something felt wrong. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone was trying not to be heard. Then I heard whispers, too quiet to make out the words. My heart was racing. I nudged my girlfriend awake, putting my finger to my lips to keep her quiet. We lay there in the dark, barely breathing, straining to hear what was happening outside. The whispers stopped, but then we heard something else. A dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the ground. It went on for what felt like forever, getting fainter as it moved away from our door. We waited until we couldn't hear anything anymore before we decided to make a run for it. But when I tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door was stuck. No, not stuck, locked. From the outside, panic set in. We started pounding on the door, yelling for help. That's when we heard it, more whispers, but this time they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the walls. It was like being in a nightmare. The whispers were all around us, getting louder. We couldn't make out words, just a constant, menacing murmur. It felt like we were being watched from every angle. We tried the windows, but they were sealed shut. The phone in the room was dead. Our cell phones had no signal. We were trapped. Hours passed like this, with us huddled on the bed, jumping at every sound. The whispers never stopped. Sometimes they'd get quieter, almost disappearing, only to come back louder than ever. As the night wore on, we started to see things. Shadows moving in the corners of the room. The wallpaper seemed to ripple, like something was moving behind it. Once I swear I saw a pair of eyes blinking at me from a crack in the ceiling. We were losing it. The lack of sleep, the constant fear, it was all too much. We started to wonder if we'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe we were just having some kind of shared hallucination. But then, just as the first light of dawn started to creep through the curtains, everything stopped. The whispers cut off abruptly, the shadows retreated, and we heard a click, the door unlocking. We didn't wait around to see what would happen next. We grabbed our stuff and ran, not even bothering to check out. As we peeled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The motel manager was standing in the doorway of the office, waving goodbye with that same creepy smile. We drove for hours without stopping, too scared to pull over even when we ran low on gas. We didn't talk about what happened. I'm not sure we could have explained it if we tried. Even now, months later, I still have nightmares about that place, about the whispers in the walls and the feeling of being watched. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, sure that I can hear those whispers again. We never made it to her parents' place that Thanksgiving. We never told anyone the full story of what happened at the lone motel. Who would believe us? But we made a pact that day. No more road trips, and definitely no more staying in out-of-the-way motels. I don't know what really happened that night. Maybe it was all in our heads. Maybe that place was haunted. Or maybe there was something even worse going on, something I don't want to think about. All I know is, whenever I see a motel sign on a dark, lonely stretch of highway, I keep driving, no matter how tired I am, no matter how far the next town is, because you never know what might be waiting for you behind those doors. You never know who or what might be listening from inside the walls. Sometimes when I'm driving at night, I think I see that neon sign in the distance. Lone motel, flickering in the darkness. But it's never there when I get closer. Just an empty stretch of road, with the trees crowding in on both sides. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that the lone motel was a one-time thing, a ghost story to tell around a campfire. But deep down I'm not so sure, because out there on the endless highways, in the spaces between towns where the darkness seems to go on forever, anything could be waiting. So if you're ever on a long drive and you see a sign for the lone motel, do yourself a favor, keep driving. Don't look back, and whatever you do, don't stop for the night, because once those doors close behind you, there's no guarantee they'll ever open again. I'd been on the road for hours, and my eyes were getting heavy. The endless stretch of highway was making me drowsy, so when I saw a sign for a shortcut through the forest, I figured why not? It would save me some time, and maybe wake me up a bit. As I turned onto the narrow road, the trees seemed to close in around me. The sun was setting, and shadows stretched across the pavement. I switched on my headlights, but they barely cut through the darkness. Something about the forest felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The road twisted and turned, and I lost all sense of direction. My GPS signal dropped, leaving me with no idea how far I'd gone or how much farther I had to go. I started to regret my decision, but there was nowhere to turn around. After what felt like hours, I still hadn't seen any signs of civilization. No houses, no other cars, not even a street sign. The trees pressed in closer, their branches scraping against my car. I swear I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but when I looked, there was nothing there. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and I kept checking my rearview mirror. The darkness behind me seemed to follow, always just out of reach of my taillights. I tried to tell myself I was being silly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Then I saw it, a wrecked car on the side of the road, its front end smashed against a tree. I slowed down, peering through the gloom. The car was empty, its doors hanging open. No signs of life, just an abandoned wreck in the middle of nowhere. As I drove past, my heart nearly stopped. Something heavy landed on the roof of my car with a loud thump. I jerked the wheel, nearly running off the road. Then I heard it, the sound of nails or claws scraping down the back window. I floored it, tires screeching on the pavement. The scratching continued, following me as I sped through the darkness. I was sure something was on top of my car, but I was too scared to stop and check. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it an animal? A branch that had fallen? Or something worse? The forest seemed to press in even closer, the trees a blur as I sped past. I kept waiting for the road to end, to crash into a tree or drive off a cliff, but it just kept going, twisting through the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, I saw lights in the distance. A town. I nearly cried with relief as I sped toward civilization. The scratching had stopped a while back, but I was still terrified to slow down. I screeched into the first gas station I saw, breathing hard. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine. For a long moment, I just sat there, trying to calm down. Then, slowly, I got out of the car. At first, I was afraid to look, but I had to know. I walked around to the back of my car, dreading what I might find. The roof was empty. No animal, no fallen branch, nothing. But then I saw them. Deep claw marks, gouged into the metal across the entire back of my car. They were real. It hadn't been my imagination. I ended up staying in that town that night, too shaken to continue driving. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. What was out there in those woods? What had been on my car? The next morning, in the light of day, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it all. Maybe I'd been more tired than I realized. Maybe I'd dozed off for a second and dreamed the whole thing. But then I saw my car. The claw marks were still there, just as deep and terrifying as they had been the night before. I got them fixed before I went home, not wanting to explain to anyone what had happened. I'm not sure I could explain it if I tried. I took the long way home, sticking to main roads and well-lit areas. I've never taken another shortcut since that night. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I still check my rearview mirror, half expecting to see those woods behind me. And sometimes, I swear I can still hear the sound of claws on metal, following me through the darkness. I don't know what was out there in that forest. I don't want to know. But I do know one thing: I'll never take a shortcut through the woods again. Some roads are better left untraveled, some forests better left unexplored, and sometimes the long way around is the safest path of all. That night changed me. I used to love road trips, the freedom of the open road. Now I get nervous driving anywhere unfamiliar. I stick to main highways and only travel during the day. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that something is out there, waiting in the shadows. I've tried to research the area to see if anyone else has had similar experiences, but I can't even find the road I took on any map. It's like it doesn't exist. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but then I remember those claw marks and I know it was real. I still have nightmares about that night. We'd planned it for months, a week-long adventure through the Southwest, hitting all the tourist spots and national parks. There were 5 of us crammed into Jake's old Subaru, along with way too much camping gear. I was excited, but also a little nervous. My friends knew about my sleepwalking, but I assured them it hadn't happened in years. I'd grown out of it, or so I thought. The first few days went great. We saw the Grand Canyon, hiked in Zion, and took tons of photos. By the 4th night, we were deep in a remote area of Utah, surrounded by red rocks and scrubby desert. We found a secluded spot to camp, far from any official campgrounds. As we set up our tents, I felt a weird energy in the air. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to me. We stayed up late around the campfire, telling stories and looking at the incredible stars. Eventually, we all turned in, exhausted from a long day of driving. I drifted off quickly in my tent, hoping for a good night's sleep. The next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake. My friend Sarah was kneeling next to me, her face pale in the glow of her headlamp. I blinked groggily, disoriented. Why was she waking me up, and why did my feet hurt? As I came to my senses, I realized I wasn't in my tent anymore. I was standing next to our car, the gravel of the parking area digging into my bare feet. How did I get here? The last thing I remembered was falling asleep in my sleeping bag. Sarah helped me back to camp, filling me in on what happened. Apparently, I'd wandered off in the middle of the night. When they realized I was gone, everyone freaked out and started searching. They found me by the car, just standing there staring into the darkness. I felt horrible for scaring everyone, and embarrassed that my sleepwalking had resurfaced after all these years. I apologized profusely as we got back to the tents. The others seemed shaken but relieved. We all tried to go back to sleep, but I lay awake for hours, unnerved by what had happened. The next morning, things got even weirder. As we started to pack up camp, Jake noticed something strange on one of the juniper trees nearby. At first, I thought it was just natural scarring on the bark. But as I looked closer, I saw it was some kind of symbol carved into the trunk, a circular shape with lines radiating out from the center. My blood ran cold as Sarah called out that she'd found more symbols on other trees. They formed a rough circle around our campsite. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized I must have done this during my sleepwalking episode. But how? And why? I had no memory of it at all. The mood in camp quickly turned tense. No one said it out loud, but I could tell they were all freaked out. We packed up in record time and got back on the road. The plan had been to stay another night in the area, but we all silently agreed to keep driving and find a motel instead. As we sped down the empty highway, my mind raced. What the hell had happened last night? I'd sleepwalked as a kid, sure, but I'd never done anything like carving symbols before. It was like something had taken control of me. The thought made my skin crawl. We drove in uncomfortable silence for hours. I could feel my friends shooting concerned glances my way. I wanted to reassure them, to laugh it off as a weird fluke, but I was just as disturbed as they were. That night at the motel, no one wanted to room with me. I didn't blame them. I was scared to go to sleep myself, afraid of what I might do. I considered tying myself to the bed, but that felt too extreme. Instead, I just lay there all night, every creak and noise making me jump. The rest of the trip was a blur. We cut things short and headed home early. I could tell my friends were worried about me, but also wary. Our easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by an awkward tension. I didn't know how to fix it. Back home, I tried to put the incident behind me. I told myself it was just a one-time thing brought on by stress or the unfamiliar environment. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I kept having vivid nightmares about standing in that circle of carved trees, feeling a presence around me that I couldn't see. I never went camping again after that trip. My friends drifted away over time. I think the whole thing freaked them out too much. I don't blame them. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, half expecting to find myself outside carving strange symbols into the walls. I never got any answers about what really happened that night in Utah. Part of me doesn't want to know. But sometimes when I'm driving alone on a dark, empty road, I feel that same eerie energy from the desert. And I wonder if whatever was out there is still with me, waiting for another chance to take control. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, just me, my wife, and our 2 kids heading to visit my parents for the weekend. We decided to take the scenic route, thinking it'd be a nice change from the boring highway drive. That decision changed everything. We'd been on the road for hours, winding through forests and farmland. The kids were getting antsy, and I was starting to feel the need for a bathroom break. That's when we spotted it, an old town sign, weathered and barely readable. As we drove in, something felt off. The streets were empty, not a soul in sight. Buildings looked abandoned, paint peeling and windows boarded up. It was like the whole town had just up and left. We parked near what looked like an old gas station. The silence was eerie. No birds, no distant traffic, nothing, just dead quiet. My wife suggested we split up to find a restroom quicker. Looking back, that was our first mistake. I took our son, she took our daughter. We agreed to meet back at the car in 15 minutes. I headed towards what seemed to be a small diner. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, it was like stepping back in time. Dust-covered tables, an old jukebox in the corner, but no bathroom. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper like someone was right behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just empty booths and shadows. My son tugged at my sleeve, pointing to a door marked restrooms. We hurried over, but it was locked. As we turned to leave, I swear I saw movement in the kitchen. Just a flicker, but enough to send chills down my spine. Outside, the town seemed different. The streets had changed somehow. Buildings that I thought were on one side were now on another. It was disorienting, like being in a maze. We rushed back to where we'd left the car. My wife and daughter were already there, looking pale and shaken. They'd had similar experiences, strange noises, feeling watched, the town seemingly shifting around them. As we piled into the car, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Handprints, smeared across the windows. They hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. I started the engine, desperate to leave this place behind. As we drove out of town, I glanced in the rearview mirror. What I saw still haunts me. Figures standing at the edge of town, just watching us go. They were too far to make out clearly, but something about them seemed wrong, inhuman. We drove in silence for miles, each lost in our own thoughts. It wasn't until we reached the next town that we finally felt safe enough to stop and talk about what happened. To this day, we can't explain what we experienced in that abandoned town. We've looked for it since, even tried to find it on maps, but it's like it never existed. Sometimes I wonder if we imagined the whole thing. But then I remember those handprints, those watching figures, and I know it was real. We still take road trips, but we stick to the main highways now. And we never, ever stop in towns we don't know. Some places are better left unexplored, some roads better left untraveled. I learned that the hard way, on what was supposed to be a simple family road trip. The memory of that day still creeps up on me sometimes. When I'm driving late at night and pass a dimly lit exit sign, or when I'm in a quiet building and hear an unexplained noise, it's a reminder that there are things out there we can't explain, things that defy logic and reason. I've tried to rationalize it over the years. Maybe it was some elaborate prank, or we accidentally stumbled onto a movie set. But deep down, I know those explanations don't fit. What we experienced was something else entirely. The kids don't talk about it much anymore. They were young then, and I think their memories have faded with time. But my wife and I, we remember. We see it in each other's eyes when we pass a abandoned building or drive through a quiet town. I've thought about trying to find that place again, to prove to myself that it was real, to get some answers. But then I remember the fear, the overwhelming sense of wrongness, and I know it's better left alone. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself wondering about those figures we saw as we left. Who were they? What did they want? And most chillingly, what would have happened if we'd stayed just a little bit longer? It's changed the way I see the world, made me more cautious, more aware of the unexplained things that exist just beyond our understanding. I used to scoff at ghost stories and urban legends. Now, I'm not so quick to dismiss them. I've never shared this story publicly before. Who would believe it? It sounds like something out of a horror movie or a campfire tale, but it happened. It was real, and it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't the monsters under our beds or the villains in our stories. Sometimes the scariest things are the quiet, empty places that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. The trees loomed dark on either side, and there wasn't another car in sight. I was getting pretty tired, but we still had a ways to go. Sarah had dozed off in the passenger seat, so I cranked up the radio to keep myself awake. That's when I first noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was just nice to see another car out here in the middle of nowhere. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized the car behind us wasn't passing or falling back. It just stayed right there, maybe 2 car lengths behind us. I tried to shrug it off, but something about it was starting to make me uneasy. The road was wide open. Why wouldn't they just pass us? I sped up a little, thinking maybe they were just on autopilot, following our taillights. But the car sped up too, maintaining that same uncomfortably close distance. Now I was getting annoyed. I tapped the brakes, hoping they'd take the hint and back off. Instead, the car surged forward, nearly rear-ending us before dropping back again. My heart started racing. This didn't feel like normal traffic behavior anymore. I nudged Sarah awake, trying to keep my voice calm as I explained the situation. She twisted around in her seat to look, then quickly faced forward again. The fear in her eyes made my stomach drop. We drove on for another 15 minutes like that, me constantly checking the mirrors, Sarah sitting tensely beside me. The car never backed off, never tried to pass, just stayed right there behind us, headlights blazing. Finally, I'd had enough. There was a wide shoulder coming up, so I put on my blinker and started to pull over. I figured we'd let them pass and be done with this creepy game, but as we slowed down, so did the car behind us. We came to a stop on the shoulder, and the other car stopped too, sitting maybe 20 feet behind us. Its headlights were so bright I could barely see anything in the mirrors. We sat there for what felt like forever, engine idling, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, Sarah gasped and grabbed my arm. I saw it too. The car's passenger door was opening. I stomped on the gas before I could even think, peeling back onto the road with a squeal of tires. In the mirrors, I saw the car's door slam shut, and then it was after us again. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel as I pushed the car as fast as I dared on the dark, winding road. The car behind us kept pace easily. No matter how fast we went, those headlights stayed locked on us. Just when I thought we couldn't take it anymore, I saw the glowing sign of a gas station up ahead. I didn't even care if we needed gas. I just wanted to be around other people. I whipped into the station so fast I nearly clipped the pump. As we pulled in, I saw the car behind us suddenly accelerate. It blew past the station entrance, headlights disappearing into the night. Just like that, it was gone. We sat there for a minute, both of us breathing hard, unable to believe it was over. The gas station attendant came out, looking concerned. When we explained what happened, his face went pale. Turned out we weren't the first to have this experience. He told us other drivers had reported similar encounters on this stretch of road. A car that follows too close, won't pass, stops when you stop. Some people even claimed they saw strange shadows moving in the back seat of the car. We ended up staying at the gas station for over an hour, too rattled to get back on the road. When we finally did leave, I was so tense, I nearly jumped out of my skin at every set of headlights I saw in the mirror. We made it to Sarah's parents' house without any other incidents, but that night on the road stayed with us. For weeks afterward, I'd find myself checking the rearview mirror obsessively, always half expecting to see those headlights bearing down on us again. I've driven that road many times since then, always in daylight, always with an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I've never seen that car again, but sometimes when it's dark and I'm driving on a lonely road, I can't help but glance in my mirrors, just to make sure there's nothing there, following too close, waiting for me to let my guard down. That night changed the way I think about driving, especially at night. It's not just about watching out for deer or drunk drivers anymore. Now I'm always aware that there might be something else out there in the darkness. Something that doesn't follow the rules of the road, or maybe any rules at all. I've tried to rationalize it over the years. Maybe it was just some idiots playing a prank. Maybe they were drunk or high and didn't realize how scary their behavior was. But deep down, I know it was something else. The way that car moved, the precision of its maneuvers, the feeling of being hunted. It wasn't natural. Sarah and I don't talk about it much anymore, but I know she feels the same way.